Well, today we get some excitement, murder, music, and mystery, but from our very own Jeremiah Gregory. And I don't think Jeremiah ever did a talk about himself, so I get to tell you about Jeremiah. But just kind of know I like his wife more sometimes. Jeremiah is a sixth generation Oklahoman since the first Oklahoma land run, two-time OSU graduate, bachelor's in economics and bachelor's in finance. He has a master's degree in taxation from Kansas State University. I'm going to go down. He was a junior high and high school business and social studies teacher for 5 years before he went to law school. He went to law school at the school that we will not name or color we will not talk about. Served in the United States Air Force as an intelligence officer, 2 deployments to the Middle East in support of Operation Endurance and Freedom. Former prosecutor for the Oklahoma Attorney General's Office, former prosecutor and county attorney. He got to put up with me for Logan and Payne County DA. Currently in private practice, he's married to Alicia, one of our very own, and she is a veterinarian at Trinity Vet, and they have 2 little girls, which I adore dearly, Scarlett and Aurora. And that is our Jeremiah, and if you didn't know, he is very well-rounded. He is very impressive, he's very knowledgeable, and I'm excited to hear about his presentation. Jeremiah?
I'm going to be completely honest. Is this thing even on? Or I am absolutely miserable right now. I just came from Dr. Carapence's office. I have 2 hernias that have turned very, very painful, and they're trying to get me in the morning for surgery, and so I'm just crossing my fingers that they can make a miracle happen, because when I wake up in the morning, I feel pretty good because I've been laying down all night, but by about this time is when the pain starts to set in. So I'm telling you that not to be overly descriptive or overshare, but you're going to know that when I start making those sounds, you're going to wonder why. What? No, it's actually, I'd have to lay down. Can I lay down and do the presentation? So, real quick, I want to look around and see who are the attorney. I see Mr. Camel's here. I see Mr. Osborne here. Yes, sir. I see 3. I don't see any criminal attorneys. I don't think there's any criminal attorneys to criticize. Huh? Did you guys ever practice criminal law? Never did? Well, I need someone like Royce Hobbs here to shout out bad things at me in the back as I go through this presentation. But real quick, if I could get a show of hands here, this is going to make sense when I get to the end as to how this all ties in together. You're going to be like, what is this presentation and why are we here? But I want to ask, who here likes country music? Raise your hand if you like country music. Okay, now let's be honest. Raise your hand if you hate country music. Come on, there's got to be. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Okay, all right. I want I want to modify my question a little bit and say, who here likes real country music? And when I talk about real country music, I'm talking about Hank Williams, not Hank Williams Jr. I'm talking about original Hank Williams. I'm talking about Roy Acuff, Ernest Tubb, Lefty Frizzell, George Jones. George Jones, one of the greatest. And so that kind of brings me to this presentation as to why I give this presentation. I give this presentation multiple times to entities, actually not just in Payne County, but across the state now. And it's an amalgamation of my 2 main interests besides love of my life. The 2 main interests that I have that are going to be music, mainly country music. I like all music, but country music specifically, and criminal justice. And you can probably hear, based upon what Ms. Glenna had said, that I've done a lot in criminal justice, and I've really found what I like the most. And so this presentation is an amalgamation of those together, and it's actually a very important presentation. When we get to the end of the presentation, you're going to see why, and you're probably going to see me get fired up just a little bit, but for right now, let's have just a little bit of fun. Do not make fun of me. I do play the banjo, okay? And I've been mocked for that, and I don't really care. If you want to mock me, go ahead. I play what's called anybody here heard of Flatt and Scruggs? Flatt and Scruggs was the bluegrass genre of country music. Flatt and Scruggs are known for the Beverly Hillbillies theme song, Listen to a Story About a Man Named Jed. So Flatt and Scruggs, Earl Scruggs came up with the 3-finger pick, and that's what I learned to play as a young kid on into college. Haven't picked up the banjo in years, but there's a kind of banjo picking that I cannot master, probably because I really haven't tried it, but you really have to be able to do it right to sound good. And it's a pick strum that's called a clawhammer banjo, and this man right here is my hero. This is Stringbean. from the television show Hee Haw, Star of the Grand Ole Opry. Who here has watched Hee Haw before? Oh, wow. Okay, all right. So I've given this presentation to people who are a little bit younger, and they're like, what's Hee Haw? Now, some of the younger kids that I've given presentations to relate to the pants that he's wearing, but they don't know who he is. So I would give anything to be able to play clawhammer banjo. You've got to be able to pick and strum with the top of your fingernails in a way where it sounds good. When I try it, it sounds horrible. So this isn't his best video, but it's pretty good. Okay, so you guys get the point. His voice isn't much to, I know about his voice, but to master clawhammer banjo is really, really difficult. So I've always been impressed with him since I was a kid, until I discovered what happened to him and his demise. And I knew that as a kid, and I was always kind of fascinated, like a lot of people are, with murder. Now that sounds grotesque, I know, but if we all really want to be honest, deep down inside, we're all a little bit fascinated with murder, how somebody could take somebody else's life. If you look here, one of my favorites is Ernest Tubb right there, and anybody here heard of Ernest Tubb? Great, he was king of honky tonk. So, oops. Okay, so he was a star of Hee Haw. Hee Haw, for those of you who don't know, ran from 1969 to 1997, 28 years, about 685 episodes, I believe, Hee Haw. Got to watch the reruns growing up, which is how I became so familiar with Stringbean. You can see the main characters of that. You see up there Grandpa Jones, he's up there playing a banjo, also does an excellent clawhammer banjo. You see Roy Clark, who is a Tulsan, buried over in Tulsa, passed away here not long ago. You see Stringbean. If you ever watch I Love Lucy, you would know that that's Tennessee Ernie Ford next to Grandpa Jones. He guest starred with Lucille Ball a few times there. And so this is the Hee Haw show that I grew up, that cornpone kind of ridiculous humor. Here's the Hee Haw. Hee Haw main stars Roy Clark. You see Buck Owens. I can't remember, Gordy, I think it's Gordy Tabb. Then Stringbean, you see Junior Samples, Grandpa Jones, and all the way down you see Archie Campbell. All those were kind of the main stars, particularly in the early onset of Hee Haw. There's been a lot of what they call in the legal profession CLEs, continuing legal education. And one of my favorite legal CLEs I've ever been through was a CLE specifically that I look for in regards to the murder of Stringbean. He was murdered in the 1970s, very tragically. And this case is such an interesting case because it brings together murder, which is interesting, and then it brings in issues that we attorneys are interested in, like, rules of evidence and confrontation clause of the Constitution and procedure in the courtroom. I'm not going to take you all through all of that. I actually have to back out here and go to the YouTube because it wouldn't download for me. But this sets a very good overview about the case before I go into it and summarize it for you. You might want to turn that up, Kevin.
There's a Hee Haw member that's not with us tonight. His life ended tragically in November of 1973. His name was just plain old Stringbean. He was a legend in country music as well as the Grand Ole Opry, where he performed every week. He was more than a friend to me. He was like a brother. String was my fishing partner and hunting partner. And he taught me how to find ginseng. That's something that grows out in the woods wild, a herb like. We bought a farm together, the same one he lived his last days on. He told me he wouldn't buy a farm with anybody but me. And we floated so many times on the Harpeth and Stone River.
Great day in the morning. It's a great day for fishing today, ain't it, String?
It is, it is. It's a day for fish.
How are you fishing today, String?
I'm fishing off the bottom, Grandpa.
Oh,
That's where the big ones are.
they are, huh?
Yeah, they ain't like people. Instead of working their way up the top, they start at the bottom and lock it there. And that's a fact.
And when we'd catch fish and cook 'em on the bank, I remember he could tell me to make him some Agrofortis coffee. And that meant strong coffee. String was a funny man.
It's the world goes away.
String, have you heard from home lately?
Yeah, I got a letter from home today.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I got it next to my heart. Heart. Yeah, there it is. You all know my folks know. Yeah. We had a good time up there. Let's see what it says. Say, dear Stringbean, that's me.
That's you.
Say, they got a smart aleck working at the post office here now. Got a smart aleck. See, I went down and asked him if I had any mail, and he looked at me and said, what's your name? And I said, smart aleck, if I got any mail, my name will be on it.
We all on Hee-Haw miss him. And I know I do.
It really was pretty grotesque and pretty tragic what happened to him. And we're going to talk about that briefly, and it's going to make sense, like I said at the end, what we're about to talk about. So Stringbean Aikman was known as Dave. He was originally David. And if you looked at the pants that he wore, if there's an old country artist who's deceased, name was Little Jimmy Dickens, a little short guy. And one day he put on Little Jimmy Dickens' pants, and it only came up to here. And well, he became where it looked like he had a big torso. They nicknamed him Stringbean, and he was Stringbean for the rest of his life and even into perpetuity today. In addition to being on Hee-Haw, he's also a star of the Grand Ole Opry. For those of you who don't know what the Grand Ole Opry is, the Grand Ole Opry is the radio program, the WSM radio program out of Nashville. Been around, just celebrated its 100th year anniversary. Been to the Grand Ole Opry many times, grew up going with grandparents to the Grand Ole Opry, which is why I know all of the old stars and don't really care about the new ones. You'll see right here the Ryman Auditorium up there. There's a new Opry House that's over by the Cumberland River on the other side of Nashville, but the downtown Nashville had the original Ryman Auditorium. And it's not just country singers that have proved there or that have performed there. You saw Roy Orbison, Elvis Presley, the Beatles, a lot of different people appeared and still appear to this day at the Ryman Auditorium. They still have Opry House shows at the Ryman Auditorium during the winter, but during the summer season when it's in demand, they go to the big Opry House across Nashville. I want you to take a look at that photo that's in upper middle. You see him sitting in front of a fireplace because that fireplace is going to play into this here in just a little bit. You can see sitting next to him, the fine lady sitting to his right, excuse me, to his left, is going to be his wife, Estelle Aikman. The date is November the 10th, 1973. A little cool outside. Stringbean's doing a performance at the Grand Ole Opry, and he decides he has to be on the front end of the Opry lineup so he can get home that night. And right after his first performance, he goes in the back for a jam session. For those you hear about artists talk about the backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, usually jam session amongst these artists. And Stringbean, unbeknownst to him and his wife, did his final jam session, and the final song that he did before he headed home that night was Lord, I'm Coming Home, which was pretty profound. The way the story goes is he's headed back to his home in Ridgetop, Tennessee, which is not too far north of Nashville. Now take a look at those two houses there. There's the White House that you see on the right. That belongs to Grandpa Jones, who you just heard, the older gentleman that was paying homage to Stringbean. He bought that farm, like he said, with Stringbean. Stringbean wanted the little small one. He had no kids. It was just him and his wife. So he took that one, and Grandpa Jones took the other house. But a couple of years prior to this, Grandpa Jones built a beautiful home. It's still there, down Ridgetop Road, beautiful, gorgeous home. And ultimately, Stringbean didn't want to leave. And so they left that White House empty, and Stringbean lived out there with his wife by himself. That night, unbeknownst to Stringbean, there are two criminals who are burglarizing the home. Now, you probably can recognize that Stringbean and his wife were products of the Great Depression and refused to put money in the bank. So, as the story goes, the legend or the lore in Nashville was that they had a ton of money and refused to put any of it in the bank, and they would hide it in their house, hide it in their pockets, hide it in the ground, hide it in their vehicle. And of course, this gets out, including to these two individuals that are cousins, an individual by the name of John Brown and Marvin Brown. First cousins, John's the older one and Marvin's the younger one. They go over there and they turn the radio on when they break into the house so they can hear. They know that Stringbean's on the Opry lineup. So they're listening for Stringbean, knowing he's not coming home, knowing that Estelle always goes with them to the Grand Ole Opry. So this gives them kind of the notice to know that they're not going to be anywhere in the house anytime soon. So they completely ravage the house. Find nothing. Zero. I mean, maybe little itty-bitty things. And they decide, all the money must be on Stringbean and Estelle, so they decide to hide and wait for Stringbean and Estelle to come home so they can rob them rather than just burglarize the home. And ultimately, Stringbean comes home that night, and this is by the accounts of the two individuals who ended up confessing to the murders, said that he obviously felt something was going on because he stops there at the entryway to his driveway and turns the lights off, and then slowly proceeds up the driveway with no lights on. Feels there's something wrong. Obviously, he has his wife staying there, pulls out a gun that he has underneath of his seat, that he always kept underneath the seat in his Cadillac, goes into the front door. It's dark, nobody's in there. They jump out and start shooting at him. He shoots back. They ultimately wound him. Hits multiple times. He falls in front of that fireplace that you saw the picture of, blood all over. Unfortunately for Estelle, she happened to walk up to the door right at the time her husband is getting shot multiple times. She screams and begins to run. And she runs, let me see here, there's a picture of her. She runs down the driveway, collapses to her knees and begs the murderer, John Brown, for her life, of which he refuses to give to her, and executes her, execution style, with multiple bullets to the head, after she begged him for her life. Go. This, of course, creates quite a big stir in the 1970s, not just throughout Nashville and Tennessee, but throughout the country music world. Made national news. You can see all the investigators out there at the home, the white home being what used to be Grandpa Jones, and then the Stringbean's house. I'll go over here and you can see the X marks the spot. You see the X, which is the front door to the house inside where Stringbean's body was found, and you see the other X where Estelle's body was found lying there. They laid there all night long until the next morning. Grandpa Jones shows up to pick up his friend Stringbean to go for their typical fishing after an opera performance. And when he pulls up, he notices that both of the doors to their green avocado-covered Cadillac has both doors open. He floors it, or accelerates it to get up there quicker, and he finds the body of Estelle lying there with dew covering her because she had been there throughout the night. Runs into the house, sees the puddle of blood that Stringbean is lying in, and immediately gets back in his truck. There's no cell phones then, of course, and he has to run and go get a deputy sheriff, and does so rather expeditiously. Again, investigation goes on, a manhunt goes on. You can see right here, for those of you who know old country music, should know that that was the original king of country music standing in the center of that photo. That is Roy Acuff. Now, they talk about like George Strait and other people being the king of country music. Back in the day, Roy Acuff was the king. He ran for governor of Tennessee, very, very prominent in Tennessee politics, and so he was allowed to be at the investigation site, watch what was going on, and ask a lot of questions, and so that's why this picture is here. Ultimately, the manhunt ensues. They are able to find the abandoned station wagon that belonged to both Estelle and Stringbean. They didn't steal the nice Cadillac. There's only two things that Stringbean liked that he was willing to splurge money on because of that Great Depression thought process that he had. He would buy a nice new Cadillac and a color TV, and he wouldn't spend money on anything else. And so they didn't take the Cadillac. You know, there's been books written. They never really quite said why they didn't take the Cadillac. They took his old station wagon. And here's the only things that they ended up getting away with, and I've always got to remind myself, they got away with, I believe it was a chainsaw, 2 shotguns, some tools, and a couple $100 in Stringbean's hip pocket. That's it. 2 people lost their lives over that. What they actually didn't know is that Stringbean and his wife had pockets sewn on the inside of his overalls and the inside of her brassiere that had thousands of dollars in there, but they never found it. Here's what was pivotal to getting a confession from them and being able to tie them to the murders, because, you know, DNA was more limited back then. There was bloody stuff in the back of that station wagon, but it was Grandpa Jones who ultimately was able to bring the conviction for these guys, and how he was able to tie that in because they took the stuff out of the vehicle and showed it to Grandpa Jones. Remember, Stringbean had no family, and Grandpa Jones was able to look and be like, that was Stringbean's shotgun, that was Stringbean's clothing, that was Stringbean's chainsaw. And they took that forth to the criminals, and they ultimately confessed and told in detail exactly what happened. So really, as we talk about today, Without Grandpa Jones being there, we might not have gotten the conviction. Additionally, when you listen to the old defense attorneys and prosecutors and judge and jury talk about that trial, they talk about how mesmerizing Grandpa Jones was on the stand. How they listened to everything that he said, and the defense and prosecution all admitted together that but for Grandpa Jones, there may not have been a conviction. So you'll see the younger person without the beard on the left, that is John Brown. He is the one who actually did the murders. He actually pulled the trigger. The other one, his cousin Marvin, did not pull the trigger, but they were both convicted of first-degree murder. Anybody know how that would be? Attorneys, keep your mouth shut. Anybody know how that would be? It's under the felony murder rule. All jurisdictions have it, and it's if somebody dies as a result of you committing a violent felony, I go and I rob a bank and somebody gets shot and I'm not the one that pulls the trigger, I'm still liable for first-degree murder because but for what I did, that person would not have died. So Marvin, the cousin who did not pull the trigger, was convicted under Tennessee's felony murder rule, which is the same in Oklahoma, California, New York, Minnesota, anywhere you want to. There's a couple of jurisdictions that have limited that, kind of the scope of it, but that's ultimately how both of them were convicted. They were convicted and each given 99 years for each murder run consecutively. So they each got 198 years. Anybody heard of Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in Tennessee? There's a lot of songs been written about it. It's closed now. You can tour it. Ultimately, the younger one with the beard, Marvin, he dies in 2003 while he's in prison. The other one, John, is still alive. And that leads us to the next thing. Here's the final farewell. You can see Grandpa Jones is one of the pallbearers for the joint funeral between Stringbean and Estelle. And this is the article that talks about what we talked about a minute ago, but for the testimony of Grandpa Jones may not have gotten a conviction. Okay, you're going to find me overly obsessed, and that's fine. Go ahead and judge me. My poor wife and kids, they have had to go with me to every single one of these historical sites, many, many places to see where people are buried, where things occurred, where murders occurred. And so you can see the cabin is still out there today, out on it's Ridge Road, I believe. And you're going to find me even more obsessive here in a minute when I show you the next one. It's Baker Road in Ridgetop, Tennessee. Here's me trespassing. So now I'm not in the photos. Well, I guess this is being recorded, so I just told them myself. The house is, the whole farm was purchased by a young couple who shared the Grandpa Jones house with I think it was her parents, and then they lived there with young children. And the way the story goes is it had been empty for quite a long time. They purchased it and began to remodel it. Now, do you guys remember the picture of Stringbean in front of his fireplace? Remember the long-time folklore about there being a bunch of money in the house? They went to remodel the house, and they take out the paneling to replace the paneling, and behind the paneling above the fireplace, what do they find? Tens of thousands of dollars. Here's a catch. It's not worth anything. Because of the mold, the mildew, and it being above the fireplace, some of it was singed, some of it was moldy, and not a bit of it was worth anything. But they kept on to it. I don't have a picture of it, but they kept on to it, held on to it to show that, yeah, that's indeed what happened. And then, I know, further obsession, we went to the final resting place of my favorite clawhammer banjo picker, David Stringbean Aikman, which is not far from the home in which he was murdered. And I know I also had to go get pictures of the car. It is avocado green, isn't it beautiful? So short story about this. I was doing temporary duty at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina, and we had a 3-day weekend. It's just like, hey, let's go to Tennessee, and we go to this car museum. I got my friends to go. It's like, hey, it's cars. Nothing more manly than going to go see cars. And I really wanted to see this car. And so we go over there, and I'm like, there it is, Stringbean. And they're, who the hell is Stringbean? I'm the only one who did. They thought it was completely crazy. But interesting story, this went up for auction because that museum in Pigeon Forge went under. It's been bulldozed down. I understand it's now a Dollar General or something like that. And so it was sold for $26,000, had 3,000 miles on it. That's it. So, no, no, I'm not that obsessed. No. Woo! I would call that obsessive if I'd actually bought it. This gets me to the more serious part, and the point of this is we are an apolitical organization. We are an apolitical organization. I'm not here to argue politics at all. I am here to propose something that is a policy proposal. And there is a difference between policy and politics, and I think a lot of us could recognize that. This right here is John Brown. Of course, his cousin Marvin passed away, like I said, in 2003. 2014, John Brown applies for parole, and it becomes a big brouhaha because the rumor is there had been backdoor communication with the Pardon and Parole Board. Now, no, Oklahoma's Pardon and Parole Board system, I looked at it constitutionally, pretty much mirrors Tennessee. Pretty close. There's some differences, some nuances, but pretty much mirrors that. And really, with Pardon and Parole, you're not supposed to what they call ex parte the Pardon and Parole Board and try to, secretly behind closed doors, hey, we need you to do this, we need you to do that. That's really unethical. You can't do it with the judge in a criminal trial. You're not supposed to do it in a Pardon and Parole Board hearing either. But there was a lot of accusations that it happened. I don't know if it happened. I wasn't in Tennessee. I do know about the Oklahoma system, and I do know about ex parte communication with the Oklahoma system. And if somebody watching the camera that's been on the Pardon and Parole Board says that it didn't happen, they're lying, because I saw it. I saw it myself. So, back to this. For those of you who don't know, there is a country singer by the name of Jan Howard. Who here's heard of Jan Howard? Most of you haven't because her light dimmed back in the 60s. So she was popular maybe late 40s, 50s, and into the 60s, and she was a country singer, had a very beautiful, booming voice. What her claim to fame was, she had a son killed in Vietnam, but most people who had a son killed in Vietnam became anti-war. Jan became pro-war and was very vocal and would cuss out protesters, and she was very, very, very opinionated. Well, she got opinionated at the Pardon and Parole Board hearing for John Brown because one of her best friends was Estelle Lakeman.
They waited for them to come home. They knew what his schedule was. He didn't go out to dinner after the opera. He always came home. They were waiting for him. And they shot String when he went in the house. And according to the law enforcement, according to them, Estelle tried to run away, and she was on her knees begging for mercy when John Brown shot her in the back of the head, execution style. He took their lives. He took the lives of two beautiful, kind, gentle people.
Ultimately, in 2014, the murderer was granted parole after 39 years in the penitentiary. This created a huge, huge brouhaha in Nashville and throughout Tennessee and throughout the country music world, and amongst those of us who are concerned and interested and are active in criminal justice issues. I am not here today to tell you whether or not Estelle and Stringbean got justice. That's not my point of this presentation. My point of this presentation has to do with the policy and procedure of getting to that decision, okay? One of the things that I experienced as a prosecutor and that I did constantly was appear before the Pardon and Parole Board. And I've done it as a prosecutor, I've done it as a defense attorney, I've done it as a victim's advocate who had people who had family that were killed or raped, okay? And every time I would appear before the Pardon and Parole Board, I realized I can't ever tell what they're going to do. I could tell you when I appear before Judge Corley here or Judge Thomas or a lot of the judges in the surrounding counties, I can usually 80 or 90% of the time guess what they're going to do because of precedence. This is the way they do business, and I know that they'll do it with honesty and integrity. We've been spoiled in this county in past decades. We've had some great judges, particularly in this county. But in this case, when I would go before the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board, like as a defense attorney, I would be like, hey, you got someone here who's rehabilitated, they're doing good, they did good, got a good report at a DOC, they were addicts, they've gotten clean. I think they ought to get a second chance. And you would assume that the Pardon and Parole Board would give them that chance. No. They would push it off to the next dockets and push it down the road, keep them in prison. I'm like, why? Then I would see the Pardon and Parole Board let out people who had violent tendencies, and there was testimony about their violent tendencies, and they would get out of prison. And it would blow my mind. Why are we doing this? 5 politically appointed bureaucrats, you couldn't tell what they were going to do. This guy right here in the middle, I'm not going to start throwing out names because one of them I can't remember, and I don't want to do that anyway. In the middle, he was an individual. I'm trying to remember, I think it's Lawrence Anderson. I think it's Lawrence Anderson. He had violent tendencies, was ultimately let out by the Pardon and Parole Board, gets out, he goes to the next door of his family's home, the young lady in the upper left corner, murders her, cuts her heart out, brings it back, and serves it unbeknownst to the family for dinner. And then he kills off his aunt, uncle, and niece right there on the other side of the photo. And they had been warned about his violent tendencies. I didn't show the picture of the individual that I represented that was an addict who actually got rehabilitated, which is pretty cool. And they held him over longer into the penitentiary, and that still blows my mind. And I'm thinking, why did that happen? Why? And I realized what it was. It's politics. You're dealing with 5 appointed members of a body who oftentimes either have a political agenda, be it from the right or the left. I saw it both ways. It's not just one way, it was both ways. You had one people on the right who would be like, man, we want to hang him high, everyone. And then you'd have people on the left who would be like, well, I have an agenda to let everybody out. You saw it on both sides. It's happened in this state where there's ex parte communications. There was a district attorney who's on the other part of, not our district attorney, in another part of the state, who ex parte'd members of the Pardon and Parole Board to try to get someone to stay in. That is unethical, it is wrong, and it needs to stop. If somebody's rehabilitated, why would you keep them in the penitentiary for any length of time? Politics. Who's contacted you? What political connections does that person have, that victim have, that politician have? I've got a real simple solution for this. And I'm going to make it happen one way or another because it bothered me so much seeing it at the Pardon and Parole Board, and I see it to this day. I'm going to try to get it effectuated. Take a look at the Constitution. Article 6, Section 10 provides that there are 5 members appointed by the Governor, Chief Justice, Presiding Justice, or Judge of the Court of Criminal Appeals. In this situation, a lot of people who are getting appointed political appointments usually have an agenda, and that is to be further appointed to something else. They have a policy agenda. But you know, when we convict somebody, do we have appointed political appointees determine innocence or guilt? No. We have, at this very moment, jury trials going on across the United States of America, having 12 randomly selected citizens of the United States of America determining innocence or guilt. Why don't we have that for letting people out of the Pardon and Parole Board, or letting people out of prison? My proposal, every 30 days, I used to work for the multi-county grand jury unit under some former attorney generals. And in multi-county, we had a new grand jury that was always set, new 24 grand jurors every time. And it was a crime to, in any way, tamper with that grand jury. It was a crime. My proposal is get rid of the 5 members and do the grand jury system. We pull out a teacher from Stillwater. We get a retired law enforcement officer from Tulsa. We get a business owner from down in Idabel. 24 who they sit down, they look at the packages, they listen to the defendant, the victims, their attorneys, DOC, and they vote and decide. And they're not going to have a dog in the fight when it comes to politics. They're concerned about public safety and rehabilitation. If we want to effectuate public safety and we want to effectuate rehabilitative justice, let the common man come in, 24 people, and vote whether to let somebody out of prison or not. I guarantee you that will solve our problem. Not all of it, but 90% of the problem. Take politics out of the Pardon and Parole Board and do it now. Those of you know, Trish knows this well, about how to amend the Constitution. There's always state questions coming up. Ultimately, my hope is the legislature will put something like this on the ballot. But if they don't, there's another way to do it, and that's to garner the tens of thousands of votes. What's the new number now? I don't remember what the new number is in order to get something on the ballot. Yeah, I forgot about that. Anyway, I'm going to make it happen one or another. That sounds like I'm talking big, but when you have people who are addicts who've rehabilitated getting stuck in prison, and guys like this guy who killed innocent people getting out, there's a problem. And I'm telling you, I saw it firsthand when I would testify at the Pardon and Parole Board. There is problems in the criminal justice system. This isn't a right or left thing. This isn't a criminal justice reform or hang 'em high issue. It is a procedural policy issue. And we need to amend that Constitution. That's the point of this. That's the point of this presentation. And that's why I'm giving this presentation across the state of Oklahoma with the hopes that somehow we can change that Constitution and get rid of the politics in the Pardon and Parole Board.
Don't run off. Excuse me. Don't run off. First